Namaste and good morning to all of you. Let's start our Saturday's class with some prayers. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhava Swaha, Tatsavitra Bhargo Devase Dhimahi, Diyo Yo Naha Prachodayat. Asto ma satgamya, tamso ma jyotirgamya, Mrityor ma amritam gamya. Om sahna vavatu, sahna bhunaktu, sahviryam karvavahi, tejasvi nav dhitamastu, ma vidvishavahi. Om shanti shanti shanti. We are talking about Samadhi, talking about Hridaya Granthi, the knot of the heart. And in one of the verses, which we did last week, Adi Shankaracharya ji said, when the non-dual self is realized in a nirvikalp samadhi, the heart's knot of ignorance is completely destroyed. How do we attain this nirvikalp samadhi? By means of one-pointed absorption of the mental activity, which is also called chit vritti, in the self. In a way that there's no vikalps of this process. Because during the process, there are three things: knower, known, and knowing. When they get dissolved, that's a nirvikalp samadhi. Okay, so as a student, we should keep that in mind. We want to attain the nirvikalp samadhi. And heart's knot of ignorance, this Hridaya Granthi, it's not only this scripture alone talks about it. The other Vedic scriptures, Hindu scriptures, they talk about it. Some say that it is Chit Jad Granthi. That is the knot between the sentient and the conscious self and the insentient, the inert body. Due to ignorance about our essential nature, we take the ever luminous self to be the insentient body. So that means this knot is not real. Thank God. Otherwise, there will be no way out. This knot is only imaginary. But we think it's real because due to timeless sanskars, tendencies which have been gathered over countless lives, this knot has become so strong, and that's why it seems so difficult to break it, or to open it, or to disidentify with it. Sant Tulsidas ji said, Jad chetan granthi par jaye, yadapi mrisha chuh tat kathinaye. Okay, so that's why I said it's not only Shankaracharya ji, all the poets and other scriptures, they talked about it. So what is in English, what does it mean? What Tulsidas ji said, the knot between the conscious self and the inert body has come about. Although unreal, it unties with great difficulty. So in other words, there's a lot of sadhana needed for this. So we should not get disheartened that how come we cannot break this? How cannot we open it? We will open it because it's not real. But we haven't put enough effort to it. So with our sadhana, we got to make sure that we untie this knot of ignorance. So today we're going to start our class with verse number 359. Over here also, Shankaracharya ji is giving us one analogy of a worm, like a pupa and a Brahmar. He says, Sati Saktaha Nara Yati Sadbhavam Hi Ek Nishtaya Kitaka Brahmaram Dhyayana Brahmartavai Kalpate. Sati. Sati means the real, like to the real. Sat iti, Sati. Saktaha, attached. Nara, the person. Yati, becomes or gains. Sadbhavam, the reality. He means indeed Ek Nishtaya, through single pointed devotion. Ek Nishtha. Kitaka, the worm. Brahmaram, upon the wasp. Brahmar, wasp. Dhyayan, contemplating. Brahmartavai, to become a wasp. Kalpate, is transformed. One who is attached to the real becomes the real. Through single pointed devotion. So that is the first line. Sati Sakto Naro Yati Sadbhavam Hi Ek Nishtaya. So this is the way we become real. Getting attached to the real. So one who is attached to the real becomes the real through single pointed devotion. Just as the worm contemplating intently upon the wasp is transformed to become a wasp. By constantly devoting his mind to it, whether it's a person or whether it's a worm also. Ek Nishtha, single pointed meditation. So this is a very famous example which is given here. Brahmar picks up a worm and puts that worm into a place where that worm or the pupa cannot get out. It could be inside a mud nest, or it could be inside any small, where there's a very, very small opening that worm cannot get out. And that Brahmar just goes around that constantly. Anytime that pupa tries to get out, Brahmar will sting it. And that's why there's a one-pointed attention of that pupa on that Brahmar. Even though it's a torment, but continuously that pupa meditates upon this terrible wasp. So meditation is single-pointed, and it transforms into a wasp. That bug or that pupa, it becomes a wasp. And then when it becomes a wasp, it develops the capacity to break the very mouth of the nest and emerges out all by itself. They say as it comes out, what does it do first? It kills that wasp. It's so strong, has become so strong. So the worm which the wasp brings is really a potential wasp. It's only a worm, only a pupa, but a potential wasp in its pupa stage. So that's why poetically it has been used, this example, several places. So those who are extremely attached to reality, sati saktaha, with a single pointed concentration, meditate upon Brahm and become Brahm. See, just like that pupa is a potential wasp, so too all of us are potentially divine. This is what we got to take from this verse. But a great deal of discipline is needed. Sadhana is needed. We got to make an effort. That single pointed effort needs to be made to become Brahma. So at the pupa stage, that shapeless larva does not promise us a wasp, yet it is a wasp. And if it's a weak wasp, weak pupa, it will die inside. The same thing, we got to have this determination and believe in our own strength. Because normally we think we are very limited. We are mortal, pain-ridden individuality. We don't look at we don't understand that our divine real nature. But when the same person thinks that, no, there is a Brahm in me. I am part of Brahm. I am part of that infinite Sat Chit Anand. Then we become, with the help of our sadhana, become one with Brahm. So this is what he's saying. So let me read it again. Simple verse, but a deep message. One who is attached to the real becomes the real through single pointed devotion. Attached. What are we attached to? With the real or the unreal? Just as the worm contemplating intently upon the wasp is transformed to become a wasp. Okay. Let's look at next one. Kriyaha antra asakitam apasyehe kitkaha dhyayan yatha alim hi alibhavam richati तथा एव योगी परमात्म तत्वम ध्यायत्वः समायाति तत् एक निष्ठयाम क्रिया अंतर सत्यम. Attachment to all other activities. Apasya, renouncing. Kitka, the worm. Dhyayan, thinking. Yatha means just as. Alim, the wasp. He means verily. Alibhavam, the wasp nature. Alibhav. Richati, gains. Tatha means so too. Ev means alone. Yogi. Paramatma Tattvam, upon the nature of Supreme Self. Paramatma. Dhyayatva, meditating. Samayati, attains. Tat means itself. Eknishtaya, through one-pointed devotion. So this is a continuation of the previous verse. Just as the insect, renouncing attachment to all other activities, thinks intently upon the wasp and transforms into one. So too a yogi, meditating upon the nature of Paramatma, attains it through his single-pointed devotion to it. Okay, so we can see he is telling us, so what will you gain by doing what? Single-pointed devotion. So the idea of the previous verse is continued here. So now it's like a yogi's life. How a yogi's life should be. Normally we are anxious about the results, anxious about the activities, all kinds of activities. So we got to keep our mind attached constantly to Brahma. See, this pupa He did not crawl. He did not move about, not even conscious of its own breathing. Constant attention held continuously upon the wasp, Ali, and it becomes a wasp. That's how we can be. If we learn how to withdraw our own expressions through the sense organs, because normally sense organs are the one which cause trouble for us. When we learn to continuously meditate upon the nature of the infinite, as we learn it in the Upanishads, we can definitely reach that ultimate state of evolution. We will know that we are the Atma, which is nothing but Paramatma. Okay, so this example of the Brahmar, I heard it from my own Guruji's mouth countless times. So very popular among the philosophers, the teachers in the Upanishads, and over here, the Shankaracharya's, he has spent several verses on this example. So over here, these two verses. So in the pupa stage, the wasp behaves exactly like an ordinary worm. Looks like a worm. It crawls like a worm. Okay? So that's how we are. We are divine beings. But at this moment, we have forgotten. But by constant, single-pointed concentration upon the divine self, we can glide into that infinitude. We can transform into that. That is a state of ultimate human evolution. It is then the ego dissolves into the divine vision. So we have to dissolve this ego. Let's look at next one. 361. Ativ sukshamam parmatma tattvam na sathul drishtyaha pratip uttam aharati samadhina atyant susuksham vrityah gyatavyam arye ati shuddh buddhi bhi. Ativ suksham. Ativ means extremely. Suksham means subtle. Paramatma tattvam, the real nature of Supreme Self. So in other words, the truth, that is the Supreme Self, the essence. No means not, sathul drishtya, by the coarse vision of mind. Sathul. Okay, instead of suksham, it's a sthul. So by the coarse or the gross vision of mind. Prati patum, to perceive, to reach. Aharati is possible. Samadhina, through samadhi. Atyant, extreme. Susuksham vritya, by an extraordinary. See, not just a suksham, he is calling susuksham. Extraordinary subtlety of the mind. Gyatavyam, should be known. Arya, by the noble ones. Arya. Ati Shuddh Buddhi Bhi, who possesses extremely pure intellect. So he says the real nature of Paramatma is extremely subtle and cannot be reached by the gross outgoing tendency of the mind. Okay, so gross instrument cannot catch the subtle. That's what he's telling us. The real nature of Paramatma is extremely subtle. Cannot be reached by the gross outgoing tendency of the mind. It is accessible to noble ones with extremely pure intellect through samadhi, brought out by an extraordinary subtlety of the mind. What a clear picture he is giving it to us. What to do. So this reality This Paramatma Tattva cannot be recognized by the gross process of perception. And that's what Lord Krishna told Arjun. Lord Krishna kept telling Arjun that I am everywhere. He says, I cannot see you. He said, with these eyes, you cannot see me. What do you need? Divya Drishti. And he says, I'm going to give you that Divya Drishti. Then Arjun could see God everywhere. Exactly the same thing. Shankaracharya is saying the gross objects of the world cannot be seen and recognized. Even if you have a very healthy pair of eyes, the vision could be 20/20, but still with these eyes, you cannot see it. It's almost like at night, we all see the moon. But a poet will see the moon, the beauty of the moon, and gets inspired and writes the poems on that moon. Subtlety. Okay? So not the grossness, but the subtlety. He sees the beauty, he sees the special charm, and also an unearthly attractiveness in it. So for that, you need a subtle mind. So the deep message over here is that we have to make our mind subtle. So to understand in a beauty in the nature also, we need a subtler intellect. But in order to see God in this nature, we need even subtler than that. Atma is subtler than the subtlest thought possibility of the intellect. Because you got to learn how to transcend even the intellect. So then what is the instrument in whose focal length the subtle truth is brought for our recognition and experience? For that, we have to make our mind very subtle. That means we got to hush our mind, quieten our mind from all the worldly thoughts. We got to learn how to tune up this mind of ours into the higher transcendental experience. And that's why he said it can be known only by the best among the men. Arya. You got to have that kind of personality where you have conquered the lower urges, the lower emotions, the grosser, the baser tendencies. That's a Arya. So a person who has purely, perfectly have gotten hold of their intellect, lifted the veils, reduced the agitations of the mind. And that's what that purified intellect is. Sure, we need to purify our body, but more than that, we got to learn how to purify our mind and our intellect. Because this intellect, which keeps on wandering, keep on doubting, that wandering and the doubting has to be stopped. Because normally intellect wanders in the fields of sense gratification. So we got to rise above this. We got to rise above the mesh of the sense objects around us. This kind of a person is called Arya. And there's only one method to realize the truth. Vision has to become subtle by eliminating desire created as agitations. Okay? That's why the desires are our enemies. They create the agitation. Because as long as we have a veil of the vasanas in us, we cannot apprehend the reality. So this is what he keeps on telling us again and again in all these verses. So now let's look at next one. Yatha suvarnam putpak shodhitam tyaktva malam swa atma gunam samrichati tatha manaha satva raj tamo malam dhyanen Samtyaj sameti tatvam. Yatha means just as. Swaran is gold. Utpak shodhitam, by thorough heating in fire. Tyaktva, giving up. Malam, impurities, mal. Swa atma gunam, its own luster. Samrichati, gains. Tatha means also. Manaha, the mind. Sattva, Raj, Tamo, Malam, the impurities of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Dhyanen, by meditation. Santyaj, shedding. Sametihi, attains. Tattvam, the reality. He says just as gold, by thorough heating in fire, gives up its impurities and gains its own luster. So too, the mind, through meditation, sheds its impurities of sattva, rajas, and tamas, and attains the nature of Brahman. Okay? So the purification of the mind through meditation is explained here with this analogy or example of a gold purification. When they smelt gold, because the gold when it comes out from the mines, it has a lot of other impurities on it or with it. Many base metal impurities are on it. So this mixture is heated and smelted. The mixture is then heated again and again. It becomes a molten. So different other metals are extracted out of it, and at the end it's only gold. So all kinds of a dross is removed, so that there's a pure gold left in there. So he says the same process is applicable to our mental purity also. Okay, our minds are now impure because of the dross of sattva, rajas, and tamas. When we apply the heat of our own meditation, the process, the dross in the mind drops off. Everything, all the vasanas. And the sattva, when it's extremely sattva, extremely pure, it cannot remain by itself. When everything is gone and sattva also has risen to that height, this sattva, that sattva, it merges into the infinite. Because as long as it's sattva is alone sattva, a person says, I'm highly sattvic, it is still impure. It has to merge back into the infinite. So that's why he says when the sattva, rajas, and tamas are removed from the mind, it dissolves into the vision of reality. The great infinite, homogeneous consciousness is experienced. One without a second. There's no I separate than divinity. That's what he's trying to tell us. He's not saying that don't be sattvic. As long as we are in this personality layers, sure, try to become sattvic. But ultimately, in the meditation, this is what will happen, and that's what's called Samadhi. Okay? Total absorption. Now he's telling us in the next verse, do this continuous, more and more. Nirantra abhyas vashat tat itham pakvam manabrahmani liyate yada tada samadhi sa vikalap varjitaha swataha advaya anand ras anubhavakaha. Nirantar abhyas vashat, by constant practice, uninterrupted practice, continuous practice. Tat means that, it tham das, pakvam, purified, manaha, mind, brahmani, with Brahma, liyate, merges. Yada means when, tada means then. Samadhi, savikalp varjita, without any duality. Swata, by itself. Advaya anand ras anubhavaka, leading to the experience of the bliss of non-dual Brahma. Advaya. There's no two, there's only one. Thus purified by constant practice. Okay, so that's why we are told, encouraged to do meditation, because meditation is the technique to get rid of the impurities. Okay, so just like we clean our carpet with the vacuum cleaner and we make sure that vacuum cleaner is working properly. The same way, the process of meditation is to clean our own mind. Okay, purification technique. So thus purified by constant practice, when the mind merges with Brahma, and it can merge with Brahma only when it's as pure as Brahma. It has to be the same kind. If I want two things to merge, like water and sand, they cannot merge. It has to be water and water. The same way, this merging with Brahma will happen only if our own self is that pure. And purification happens with meditation. So thus purified by constant practice, when the mind merges with Brahma, then Samadhi passes from the savikalp to nirvikalp stage. Okay? So savikalp means there are some impurities are still there. Some vasanas, even though those vasanas could be sattvic, but they are still there. But nirvikalp, no vikalp left at all. And this will happen eventually with this practice. So thus purified by constant practice, when the mind merges with Brahma, then Samadhi passes from the savikalp to the nirvikalp stage, leading directly to the experience of the bliss of Brahma, the non-dual. Because the mind has matured. It has been purified. The dirt of the sattva, rajas, tamas has been taken out. And that kind of a mind, when dissolves into Brahma, is not separate from it. It attains the state of nirvikalp samadhi. So when this kind of a mind is exposed to meditation for a long period of time, it becomes fit for dissolution in Brahma. So we got to practice meditation. Keep on making our meditation more and more deep. That's how our negative tendencies, all our confusions, all our doubts, they will fall out. They'll get eliminated. Our intellect will become quiet. Not even a single disturbance in our intellect. There's no special effort needed after that. Effort is only in the beginning. To make this a firm decision that I am going to meditate. This is what I need to do. This is what my job is. No special effort in order to reach nirvikalp samadhi. Because the mind has actually ended by that time. When the mind has ended, your job is over. The quietened mind enters the state of Samadhi. Disturbed mind, agitated mind can never enter that state. Quiet mind. The experience is non-dual. Why? Because there's nothing else in it. Only one. How can there be any disturbance? Okay, no agitation. At all times and all places. Right now, sure, when we are in the company of some saintly person, we feel bliss. When we go into our altar room, we feel bliss. But even when we are other places with other people doing our duties, still we should feel the same kind of a bliss. If the mind is pure. So it is the joy in the joyous. That's called Anand Rasa. It's like an essence of the joy, Anand Rasa. There's no other way of describing this rasa. So what is he telling us? Meditate, meditate, meditate. That's what we need to do. Should be very important to us. Meditate. Let's do another one. Samadhina anena samast vasanaha granthe vinashaha akhil karma nashaha antarbehi sarvata ev sarvada savarup visafurtihi ay ayanataha sayat. Samadhina anen, by this samadhi. Samast vasana granthe, of the knots of all desires. Vasana granthe. Vinashaha, destruction. Akhil karmanashaha, end of all actions. Antarbahi, within and without, inside and outside. Sarvata, everywhere. Ev means indeed. Sarvada means always. Svarup visafurtihi, manifestation of one's real nature. Ayatanataha, spontaneously, that means no yatana. Ayatanta. Sayat takes place. By this samadhi, all desires which are like knots are destroyed. So meditation has reached the samadhi, and with the help of the samadhi, all the knots are destroyed. All work comes to an end. I have to do this. I am doing this. All. Kartapan, doership ends. And within and without, everywhere and always takes place a spontaneous manifestation of one's own real nature. Spontaneous. You don't even have to make any effort there. You are basking in the light of your own self. Samadhi cannot be attained. You cannot buy it. You cannot ask a realized person to touch my head and take me to Samadhi. It doesn't work that way. We have to make an effort. We got to meditate. We get inspiration from our gurus, from the scriptures, from the holy places, but effort in the beginning we have to make. We cannot just dig a hole in the ground and say that I'm going to sit there and I'll reach Samadhi. It doesn't work like that. Because we need to learn how to quieten our own mind. So we need to do the practice in the beginning. We got to learn how to detach the mind from the disturbances within and without. So there are some disturbances inside us because of our own vasanas, and some disturbances outside also. So we got to practice. We got to direct our mind to rest in Brahma. That is Samadhi. And when this Samadhi is practiced, bondage is created by vasanas are destroyed, and those are the granthis, the knots. Because vasanas create desires in the mind. Vasanas. Desires create what? Agitation. Desires, come and I. Agitations create ego-prompted selfish activities. And you are bound to the objects of the world. This is a sliding down road. But when you act in this world without ego, without egocentric desires, naturally this mind of yours will become quiet. When you try to quieten the mind more and more, the vasanas must get exhausted. Vasanas are exhausted and bondages loosened in our constant, deliberate attempts at keeping the mind in peaceful silence. Then the unmanifested vasanas, which are called sanchit, unmanifested, they are still there, but they haven't taken the form yet. They are also destroyed, the sanchit vasanas, with the practice of samadhi. That's what Rishi Patanjali talks about in the 4th chapter of that Yoga Darshan, that how you can get liberation in one lifetime through samadhi, nirvikalp samadhi. The entire sanchit karam, which has been accumulated in millions of our past lives, which is called akhil karam, all the karam, both manifested and unmanifested, they can be destroyed with this kind of a samadhi. Because vasanas which has taken into the fruition, those are like a prarabdha. And how do we get rid of those vasanas? Because sanchit vasanas, if we can destroy with the samadhi, the current vasanas, because of which we are here in this human body, we have our duties. How do we destroy those? They can be destroyed according to Bhagwan Krishna, Nishkam Karam. Selfless, dedicated activities. Whether you are head of a corporation or whether you are a server somewhere or a mother or a father, there are duties. Do those all duties, seva rupe. The prarabdha vasanas, they get destroyed too. Okay? So the vasanas that have come to fruition, prarabdha, or already manifested vasanas, if that's how you understand it, they can be destroyed by selfless, dedicated activities. Nishkam karam. The sanchit ones, unmanifested vasanas, we can burn down in the fire of samadhi. Okay? So we got to understand this process properly. But then ultimately we have to go through the process. We don't want to become bondage to further with the current manifested vasanas. Because whenever we do any action and we think that we should enjoy the fruit, we are entangling ourselves further. It's almost like you have a seeds in your hand and you just plant them again. You think I have a seeds, I'm supposed to plant. But instead, if you just roast them, give them away. So on experiencing samadhi, remember who is the doer, enjoyer of the fruits of actions. We got to be very clear about that. It's almost like We have to get rid of this aham bhav. I am the enjoyer and I am the doer. We got to roast that. It's almost like if some criminal dies before the verdict, what they're going to do? So we got to kill this ego, the separateness from the God. Me and him, just dissolve it. So that's why this teacher is telling us, try to have this clear subjective experience of your own self. Subjective experience. And this subjective experience, to have it eventually, does not require any special effort. Yatanta. Nothing needs to be done for this, or even to reach it or to preserve it in us. Once we have it, it will be there. It's almost like when you are awake, like a waking and dream states, they have been transcended. Waking and dream, no special effort is needed for the deep sleep, because you are in that state. There's no question about reaching you there. You are there. The minute you think that, oh my God, am I deep sleeping? You move out of it. Okay, so this is how this Savikalap, Nirvikalap Samadhi work. It is a complete realization of the self, by the self, in the self, and without any effort. Yatanta. But we got to remember, we shall realize this ourselves. Nobody else can do it for us. We cannot buy it, we cannot pay for it, we cannot cry for it. We got to make effort for it. Practice, sadhana. Okay, let's end the class here today. And then we will start from here with the verse number 365 next week. Om Purnamada Purnam Idam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Visheshyate. Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much.